in the midst of a series about how to make big changes in our vocabulary, actually small changes in our vocabulary instruction that result in big outcome changes for our students. I'm excited to share with you tonight just two problems that we probably are seeing in our vocabulary instruction and the solutions to these big problems. We're going to be talking tonight about this book, Teaching Words and How They Work, Small Changes for Big Vocabulary Results. If you've been hanging with us here at Reading Simplified on our Facebook page at 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, we've been talking about vocabulary for a while because we had Dr. Elfrieda Hiebert herself, Dr. Freddy, on a couple of weeks ago. Last week I talked about some of the insights from her book and how to make minor changes in our instruction around narrative texts that would make a difference for our kids, big differences. And tonight I want to speak more on the topic of informational text. That is a huge bugaboo, I think, in our ELA instruction in the elementary classroom. Historically, a lot of English language arts teachers were not really doing much informational text instruction. In the U.S., with a shift towards the Common Core, a lot of that has changed, but along the way, we might have been underprepared and how to best utilize the power of these informational texts. And so I'm excited to share two major problems that Dr. Freddy sees with how we go about using informational text, but the good news is that she also is providing some easy fixes. So I'm going to be pulling from some resources that she's helped inspire and create to show you easy ways to adapt your instruction so that you can get more bang for your buck. I'm just skimming the surface of the meat of this book. She's got so many really significant ideas. In fact, when she came on a couple weeks ago, we talked about it being a revolution in vocabulary instruction. And we'll get started talking a big picture overview with the simple view of reading. We have talked about that here before at Reading Simplified. But I just want to kind of give it, make sure we're all on the same page, and then we'll move forward from there. So the simple view of reading is a highly researched concept about what it takes to become a good reader. And so it has been deducted to these two simple things. So there you see on the right, the product as reading achievement. That's what we want. That's the holy grail, right? For all of us as teachers or parents who want our children, our students to be great at reading achievement. How do we get there? It's really just through two simple things. So it's just the interaction or the product of decoding and listening comprehension. Those two domains are the huge domains that drive the potential for beginning readers and mature readers. So we keep coming back to this here at Reading Simplified because it helps simplify how to think about our instructional choices. Are we doing a great job with decoding? Are we doing a great job with listening comprehension and learning the pieces that build those major domains? Because those are our main domains that we should focus most of our instruction on when we have a flurry of things casting demands on us. We have to go back to the roots, remember the foundations. I call these the big rocks. And so our two big rocks are just decoding and listening comprehension. You got it? But let's think about this a little bit in more depth. Here at Reading Simplified, we specialize in how to get kids to become good at decoding rapidly. A lot of kids can learn to read chapter books in a matter of 12 weeks, maybe 24 weeks, a lot faster than traditional instruction. And so since it can be so much more quickly done and it's so much easier for the teacher to disseminate, we talk a lot about it here at Reading Simplified because the standard practice is not working for us. I think when we look at in the U.S. our national data, like fourth grade, at the fourth grade level, 65% of kids are not proficient. A lot of that has to do with this domain of poor decoding. And so if you have not yet figured out a way to get all of your kids becoming good at decoding and good at word recognition and good at fluency, then I encourage you to track down some of our resources here at Reading Simplified. We're not going to be talking about that tonight, but it is our specialty. And And I want to talk tonight more about the other part of the simple view of reading, listening comprehension tonight, and we'll get into that and how it ties into Dr. Freddy's book in a second. But if you snag this PDF, you can click over here underneath Decoding, and so you can learn more about Reading Simplified. We have a 1-hour workshop where you can learn the core activities that will get almost any kid moving towards decoding pretty rapidly. And of course, you can go to readingsimplified.com and look at like our About Us page or Start Here page and to learn more. But tonight, and so that's a really important part of the reading achievement challenges that we face. But it ain't the only part, right? And so we have to focus as well on our listening comprehension and our students' listening comprehension. So I thought this was a really powerful quote from her book. Dr. Freddy said, "If a single finding or to be identified as the most definitive conclusion from the past 50 years of reading research, it would be that knowledge about a topic strongly predicts comprehension." Everybody give me some sort of aha hashtag on that. What is it that predicts comprehension? Let me hear you. What predicts comprehension? Is it a strategy? Is it even just the words? No, it's knowledge. You have to have knowledge, and knowledge is can be reduced to vocabulary, concepts, and ideas. So that's where this vocabulary is going to come into play for us. If our students have a lot of vocabulary, they have interconnections among aspects of our world that help them do what? Comprehend. When they're given a text about baseball, they know enough about baseball that they can comprehend it. If they're given a text about bacteria, they know enough about bacteria that they can comprehend it. Maybe they're not an expert in any one field, but they have a wide range of knowledge on some of the fundamentals in a lot of different fields of knowledge so that they can comprehend something that's written for at least a lay person in a variety of fields. And if anyone would know what's the best predictor or most significant finding from the last 50 years, it would be Dr. Freddy. This book is also something that she co-authored a long, long time ago. It was a very significant report that came out in the 80s when President Reagan was the president of the United States, and she is one of the authors, and it was reviewing what it takes to become a good reader. So it's a great literature review, and so she's been doing this work about understanding what are the big levers really in reading instruction for a long time. One of her chapters in this book, Teaching Words and How They Work, Dr. Freddy has a chapter about informational text, and that's really what we're going to zoom in on today. And we're not even getting to all the meat in there. There's so much good stuff, but she points out two big problems. And I wanted to bring these to your attention tonight because I think they are something that I've experienced. I think a lot of teachers that I'm connecting with still experience today in the classroom. It's been a while since I was in the classroom. I work mostly with students privately, but I think that she's right and she's on nailing it when she says these are some issues that we've got. So the first one she says is, particularly in the elementary context, we're going to have haphazard content learning, or at least haphazard content instruction in ELA. And what she means by that is maybe, one like disparate topics she talks about. Maybe there's a text that the third graders are reading about birds of prey. Maybe another week they're going to read about sheepdogs that protect penguins. And maybe another week they're going to read about the authenticity of Mona Lisa. Those are all good things to learn about, but they certainly aren't connected. There's no theme. There's no chronology there. There's not a thematic scientific topic, and there's no historical chronology built into that. So this information is haphazard. And what does she say about that? Reviews of the content in ELA periods confirm that the text of instruction can flit from topic to topic. All the while, the time devoted to science and social studies in elementary school has decreased. So in our English language arts curricula, we are getting more and more informational text, which is good, but it's bouncing around. And at the same time, we're spending more and more time in ELA. We're not giving as much attention to science and social studies. Is that true in your elementary classroom and maybe even in your middle school environment? Then how are we going to build the body of knowledge that kids need? So this is one of the problems that she's pointing out in her book. So that's the first big problem that she's pointing out. We can't be teaching haphazardly and think that our kids are going to pull all the pieces together. Now, who will pull all the pieces together? Or at least pull more of the pieces? The kids who have had privilege, or maybe the very, very terribly clever ones. But that's a small minority of our population. We need to set up our curricula in such a way that we are serving all of our students, right? And so haphazard content learning ain't going to cut it. Okay, so her other big idea is that just teaching background vocabulary before reading a text is our only or primary strategy for helping kids with vocabulary problems and for building content knowledge. It's not that that is bad. We want to find the words that are going to cause our students problems, make sure they're aware of them, maybe teach them ahead of time, and help them to decode and maybe comprehend the text better. So that is not a problem. Teaching the background knowledge before text is not a problem. It's a problem, however, when we think that that is sufficient and that that is the main engine of how we're going to get our students to become better readers. So what is the problem with that approach? Especially for the kids who don't have a lot of background knowledge, maybe have less access to print at home. Maybe you're struggling with their reading, and we know most of our kids are struggling with their reading, especially if they're struggling with their decoding. If you're working hard on decoding, what's going to happen with your ability to absorb new vocabulary information? Well, the reason that it's a problem if we're always front-loading vocabulary and we're not thinking about other strategies is that we're leaving the students to be dependent on us. If we're going to build them to become independent readers, we need to build in strategies so that they do the heavy lifting of figuring out how to solve word problems for themselves. And I'm not talking about decoding. I'm talking about how to figure out which words are the words to pay attention to and how to figure out what they mean. So as the teacher, yes, we're there to scaffold the experience, but one of the pieces of this big scaffold should not just be pre-teaching. The other big piece of that scaffold should be, how are you going to figure this out? Let me help you figure it out. Let me help you figure out a plan, and let me talk you through it, and let's talk about how it went, and let's see if you can do it next week, and maybe I'll help you out a little less. So doesn't that ring a bell with you? Does that kind of reflect some of the reading programs that you've been exposed to? It seems like a great thing. Let's pre-teach this vocabulary and make sure it gets in there. And in the couple past weeks, we've talked about her ideas of how let's be sure that these words that we pull aren't isolated words that have no connection to the book, other than they were in the book, but not really part of the theme. And also no connection to one another. So those are some issues that we've been talking about and avoiding here in this series. But in addition to teaching those words ahead of time, and even if we're doing a good job of connecting them, we need to make sure that we're not the one doing all the learning and that we're asking the kids to be prepared to do some of this heavy lifting for themselves. So that's maybe a little bit hard news to receive today if you have a curriculum that doesn't do that. I've laid out the problems for dealing with informational text and the vocabulary that we're going to work with. What are we going to do about it? Well, there are a lot of possible solutions, but most of you are in a classroom where you cannot change whole programs and change whole districts' curricula. So I'm going to suggest some tweaks that don't involve upper administration and don't require you to move to a new school. Hopefully they'll be very easy for you to adapt and implement if they serve you. And if this particular idea doesn't serve you, then use this as inspiration for thinking of something similar. So be aware that these are the problems. Haphazard content learning makes for hard vocabulary building, knowledge building, background knowledge building, and then always pre-teaching and not gathering the kids' abilities to become independent. That also is a problem. So let's talk about some solutions. These are just a couple, but I think they might be easy for you to get started with. Okay, so the easiest way, it was kind of already brought up, I think, by Sarah. If your content is coming to you in a haphazard way, what can you do to restructure it so that it's thematic? Can you reorganize the content that you already have and or add to it, or just subtract if you have the freedom to do that in appropriate ways, so that there's some thematic coherence to what you're doing. Ideally, we would be doing this because it was our curriculum, and kindergarten teachers would have a clear content body of knowledge, and it would build in, they would be supporting what's going to happen in first grade, and that body of knowledge would build on what's going to happen in second grade and third grade. We don't generally have that in the US, and I don't think in many English-speaking countries. But insofar as you're capable as an individual classroom teacher or homeschooler, or even tutor or mom or dad trying to shore up some background knowledge problems for your students, or just to try to develop them more, choose a theme and stick with it and read a lot of things on that theme and talk about the words and build those networks that we talked about in the last few weeks. I'll show you a great resource that was, I believe, inspired by Dr. Hiebert's work in a second. And we'll get to that solution more practically soon. Then obviously, probably when I was talking about how are you going to get the kids to be independent, then the solution for that, making sure that you're not always the only one teaching them the vocabulary, is you're going to try to then stress also strategies for teaching your students how to learn content and vocabulary on their own. And that will become more and more important for our learners as they move up through elementary. Like, I would think this was a really big stress in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and of course on up through high school. It may be less important in kindergarten and first grade, relatively speaking, because they really just have to learn how to recognize words and to be able to read them. That's a bigger press in those early years. These ideas still are applicable, but I think that our upper L and middle school, high school teachers, it really is applicable. So those are two solutions. Do they resonate with you? Yes, Trisha. Right. This is really one of the brilliant things that came out of whole language. If you already know how to read, then whole language, the ideas and some of the concepts from a whole language are actually quite excellent. There was teaching all this thematic stuff, building real books and writing and reading about it. That is beautiful stuff. That's how you can build networks of knowledge and develop students' independence. It's just not a good way to learn how to recognize words. Okay, so we're dealing with these problems. I talked about some solutions. Let's get into some specifics, and we're going to tie this into Dr. Freddy's resources. So the solutions are, possible solutions are to teach coherent themes and make sure that the students become strategic in how to learn vocabulary on their own. So let's first talk about just the one simple suggestion I have for you is to use article a day. How many of you have had access to readworks.org? It is an amazing free resource of lots and lots of graded passages that are often informational. And Dr. Hiebert, who wrote this book that's been so influential in thinking about vocabulary in a new way, also inspired this, I think she inspired the idea of article a day. She's done some research on it in the New York City schools, and they got some good effects for teachers doing this routine. So I just wanted to show it to you because it's one of her great contributions, and the contribution, of course, of readworks.org to get this out there and to get the concept out there. And what you can do is read one article a day and across several days stick to a theme. Is that going to solve the part of the problem of teaching haphazardly? That sounds good to me, right? Okay, so let's take a peek at this. ReadWorks. I highly recommend readworks.org. Not just for the article of a day. There's lots of great things there for you, but let's talk about a super easy way to adapt this to what you're already doing. Not overwhelming. It's a 10-minute routine that students will generally find engaging. They have everything laid out for you, so you also don't have to create a lot. And then there's something that the students do at the end, which is going to help them to be more accountable and build the knowledge. So it's a great routine. I'm so excited about it. So check this out. It's just fabulous. And there are so many different ways to use this program. You can take their passages and read them on some sort of digital device, or you could print them out, or you can put them on the projector. So whatever way suits you, and you could maybe change it up every day, do something different. But let's look specifically at the article a day routine. They give you a one-page, when you learn more about the article a day, they will give you a one-page handout for how to do their simple routine. And here it is. So I'm not giving this away, but you can easily find it at readworks.org. It's just so easy. They have these articles set. Remember, it's on a theme. There are about 6 to 9 articles related by topic. So you could read all of them, or maybe you're just going to read 5 for 5 days in a row. You have a lot of choice and flexibility, and I'll show you how you would maybe choose what works for you, but depending on other curriculum that you got going on in the building. Julie, that's exciting to hear. She says it's amazing how her kids make connections between the passages and vocabulary. It's very exciting when you see that your kids are learning the content and the vocabulary and the concepts from what they've read. And it's so much easier when they're building and they know yesterday they were talking about this one topic and they're just adding to it today. They're not jumping to something totally different. So it's a simple routine. You tell them, okay, today we're going to read this article. We're going to learn more about the world. It could be as simple as that. And then they read the short passage, and they can either read it aloud, read it silently. They could read it, chorally, or you could read it to them, or you could have them do it in small groups. They could do it all at the same time, or they could do it scattered throughout the day. Lots of different ways. I think a lot of the examples I saw in the videos and suggestions on the website were for everybody to do it at the same time. A great transition activity. They're coming in from recess. You want them to settle down. They'll know the routine. Lets everybody, here's your article of a day, get started reading it, and then they fill out their book of knowledge, which is just a fancy way of saying they collect a couple of sentences that they write about what they've learned after each time they read something new. And we know that summarizing and writing, taking notes, are really powerful ways for learning to get stuck. And so this is a brilliant idea. On the readworks.org's website, there is a place where you could have each student have their own digital book of knowledge. They just simply add little passages one after the other. Or, of course, you could have students creating a notebook, that kind of thing. And then they share. Who doesn't like to share with one another, share with their partner what they learned, and they discuss it. So there is the reading component, the writing component, and the social component, and the oral communication component. So this is such a quick, simple routine that I can't recommend it enough. And we know from Dr. Freddy's research that it has the potential for getting good outcomes too. And the research does just point to it should be effective based on what we know about reading and writing and community and oral communication in general. So they have a scope and sequence, which you could use, but you don't have to. But if you don't have any particular body of knowledge that you're already expected to teach, then I would just go with what they have. And this is one way to do it. And so if you clicked on this scope and sequence spreadsheet, it would open up to this, the most awesome spreadsheet of curricula that you ever have seen. Down at the bottom, you can look at all the grade levels, or you can just look at the kindergarten. Let's check out what's going on in kindergarten. For August, maybe we would read about animals that live by in or by water. Or at week 2, we could read about sports and fun. And week 3, we could read about community life. And how are we going to read those passages? Do we have to go hunt them down? No, it's just one little click. And you get a whole text set, the 6 to 9 articles. Boom. There you've got a PDF. You could print it. You could use it on share the screen with your classmate, with your kiddos, or have them read it digitally. And you can even assign it through the readworks.org website. So powerful. Should we see some examples? Say it's February here in the U.S. We're celebrating Black History Month. Maybe you want to go into 4th grade and pick the Harlem Renaissance. So if I was to click this here for February 1st, there's a whole packet about the Harlem Renaissance that would pop up. So let me go find that. Okay. So this is 18 pages. Each passage is short enough that you can read and write about it and discuss it in 10 minutes. And if students can't read that, then you would read it to them. And even on the website, there are everything is read aloud, sometimes by human speech, or at least there is computer speech. So it depends on the text you choose. So these are the articles that they provide to learn about the Harlem Renaissance. You can see how many words are in each passage. And then here are the passages. One simple page, maybe two. Yeah, that first one was just one page. Here we go. Let me make this a little smaller for you. So they're going to see, African American, Harlem Renaissance. They're going to see those words a lot. Music, artists, writers. They're going to see those words repeated. That's one of the insights from Dr. Hiebert's work, is that we need to make sure that the words that are core vocabulary words are repeated with enough repetition that it's more likely that students learn them, both in terms of word recognition and vocabulary knowledge. So another passage would be about Langston Hughes. And you can see again, we've got the repeating of the word Harlem Renaissance, African American. Another passage is about jazz. There's Harlem Renaissance again. We're going to have the word music. Notice here on this page that we see the word jazz a bajillion times. Can you catch them all? I think there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybe, and just in 2 paragraphs. And this is going to talk about jazz some more because this is the same one, Louis Armstrong. So I could keep going through that. Let me show you also something similar that you could do with kindergarten. This is the kindergarten version. This topic is important to African Americans. It's not just about the Harlem Renaissance, but this is what is available for kindergarten. Again, notice you'll see how many words are there and the topics. Maybe the kids want to check off what they've read, or you check it off as a class. Nat King Cole, notice there's big words on the page and not too many of them, just 3 paragraphs, that's it. And notice the repetition. You're going to see the word jazz, jazz music multiple times. That's going to be more likely then for that student to understand the concept of jazz and recognize the words jazz and music more and more. You can also do that word study that Dr. Hiebert was talking about, building the morphological networks. You can talk about music and musicians, because both of those words are here in this passage. Also, just see how they're going to be building the networks of knowledge from these passages. And you can build a timeline and help them understand where these stories took place. So I highly recommend Article a Day. So yes, we've got different grade levels here with Article a Day. We have the simple routine. We have these different topics. And speaking of topics, let's go back to that point. So maybe you don't want to just kind of randomly go around, but maybe you are teaching a passage in your ELA curriculum about weather and climates. So you just go over here to the scope and sequence and see if there is anything on weather and climate. And sure enough, there is one of the topics in the center of the page there. It's set for January, the first week of January. You could do it at any time. And then you'd pull up these passages, read about them. And then if you really want to go deep dive, you could go further with this and then go to Freddy's website, textproject.org, and get her pictures to go along with some of these core concepts. So if you go to TextProject and over here to the classroom materials section, she's got these vocabulary tools. One of the content area is core vocabulary. One of the main principles she's teaching here is that there's a core number of word families that make up 90% of the text kids are going to need to read before they even leave high school. So there's not that many. Now these families are related. Like she used the example, glory, glorious, inglorious. That's a word family, one family, but it's several words. But of course there's a lot of connection between those words. So those core vocabulary are so important for our kids to not only recognize, but also know the meaning. And she's condensed them into these topics, these powerful tools, because we know that visuals help our students. And who do they help probably the most? Our English language learners. So if you are teaching something about transportation in your social studies or science or English language curriculum, anything that's remotely related to transportation, you want to do an article of the day on that theme, then you can also go over here to textproject.org, pull up the transportation images, and you've got a whole bunch of things you could do. Or let's do the water, water everywhere, because that's what I happen to have pulled up, and I don't want to take too long. So this is from her core vocabulary. It is, folks, 69 pages, all about key words that relate to this topic of water across a lot of different types of perspectives, like landforms versus maybe science, like precipitation and condensation, that type of thing, I think. So she also connects them into networks. Let's look at this. So this is from TextProject, just the water bundle about core words. So here we have that network idea that she taught us about. Not just having haphazard vocabulary, but let's build the network. So these are some of the concepts that she's establishing in this 69-page document about water. You could talk about water in terms of the states and forms of water. You could talk about water with regard to landforms. You could talk about water with regard to the words that describe water and weather. And then you could talk about water and bodies of water. So there's a little bit of info about landforms. Let's go into that first topic first. So these are some other topics about landforms: land in or around water, basin, canal, cape, coast, or man-made objects. So let's look at those topics. Now that we've got those topics, let's look at them. We could talk about a basin. Here's the definition. We could talk about a canal, a cape, a coast, island, peninsula. A peninsula is a piece of land that is almost surrounded by water or sticking out into water. The shore, wetland, dam, dock, harbor. There we got that sound again. Pool, port, pump. You've got pictures from all over the world, so that's clever too. And now that was just one of the topics. Even if your curriculum isn't grouped thematically, you can, and you have to do certain things, you can still fold things around it and use these articles of the day, maybe use trade books from the library, and then these pictures from TextProject will really help flesh things out for your students. So just quickly, water, water everywhere, states and forms of water. Here's some more reminding you about some of the core concepts we're looking at across the board with this theme. Here's more about states and water. States of water. These are the topics. So like, let's look at what things can do in the water. So they could dissolve. You could float on the water. Things might sink in water. You could be underwater. The water could freeze. The water could melt. This is ice, liquid, steam. So it's just quite amazing, isn't it? Who would have wanted to have this kind of resource? Even as a student, it's a lot more engaging. Anytime anything multimedia was broken out in my classroom, I was always so much happier than just talking, right? And so I didn't want you to get overwhelmed. I just wanted you to think, okay, if I've got a theme, I'm going to go look for that theme over there, and I can also look for the theme and article of a day. There's a lot of overlap because I think she created the frameworks for both. So we're going to have transportation, we're going to have water, we're going to have some historical periods. It is more American focused for history, but I don't think it's exclusively American. I got so excited with that. We don't have much time for the other. Let's go back. I'm just going to quickly touch upon some ideas for how to teach students how to learn content and vocabulary on their own. There's a lot of different ways to do this. These are just things that I think are pretty fundamental. So make sure you're doing them and maybe going beyond this. So if one of the problems is that we just teach students the background knowledge before we read something and we don't prepare them to do the figuring out of the words and what to know which words are important, then these are some ideas. So first of all, teach them to pay attention to the bold words. Some kids don't intuitively get that, right? So draw their attention to that across the course of the year, and so they become a master at that. You want to hear them saying, hey, miss, I noticed that, evaporation was bold, so I knew to write it down, or I knew to study it, or I knew to look at the definition. Similarly, teach them to notice repeated words, especially in science texts. We're going to have a lot of repeated words, probably also in history texts. Teach them how to look words up. how to discern if they're going to use Google Dictionary or something, whatever comes up first in Google. And when they search Google, how are they going to discern from among the choices they have? Then maybe get them to collect words. They may have their own personal dictionary. They may have their own personal dictionary, and you may have one in the classroom. All those networks we've been building, are you building them also in the classroom, and they can keep adding to them? And then teach them to recognize the positives. Textbooks particularly, well, actually a lot of informational texts will define words using an appositive. That is just the term after a new word has been introduced. The term is usually separated by commas that will define the word. So the word might be evaporation, and then there'll be a comma, and then it will say something like when water evaporates. I don't know what's a good synonym for evaporate. When water is absorbed into the air, and then comma, and then evaporation is the first part of the water cycle or something like that. So that term in parentheses, that phrase, or maybe even a word, just one word, can be the definition of the word, the first word that was introduced, and that's what an appositive is. A lot of kids don't know that, and they need to know that to look for that. The author's trying to be gentle, and if it's a new concept, a new word, they're probably going to define it. So it's either going to be in the glossary, off to the side. It's going to be just explicitly said, evaporation is blah, 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 or it might be defined as an appositive, that little phrase that's right back to back with the subject. And then this last one is just the beginning of hopefully a mushrooming of ideas. Make sure you're getting the students actually to draw and show relationships among words and ideas. There's so much there that they could do on their own and show agency for how they're connecting evaporation and precipitation. All right, so that's just an inkling of how to get some of those solutions moving for you if you haven't been thinking about that already, or if you just need a little more inspiration to get back to it. Hopefully that will be useful to you. Would you like future complimentary trainings like this here at Reading Simplified? Then make sure you ring the bell here at YouTube to become a subscriber so that you learn more of our ways of streamlining instruction and accelerating students' reading achievement. And you can also find us on Facebook at Reading Simplified, usually on Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We go live with other complimentary trainings, and we give away some freebies for teachers and parents. So I hope to see you here again next time on YouTube or even on Facebook. Take care.